Well, he'd worked with very successfully with Alan Silvestri, so I wasn't, on the Croods. So, and I'm a huge Alan Silvestri fan, so I was kind of like staying away from it. But I think Alan was busy on something else, so I got back in there a little bit. But no, Chris is so wonderful. Obviously I'd worked with Chris and Dean on the first one, and then just Dean on 2 and 3. So I hadn't seen Chris in a little bit. But I remembered what a sort of wonderful energy he's got. He's incredibly sort of, he's gloriously loving, I would say, and that is a very wonderful sort of trait in a director. Makes you feel very, very powerful. Right. So you work hard for people like that, I think. It did evolve fairly crazily. It started out, they sent me a very early cut, which was, the whole film was kind of done in, it's like electronic storyboards, very, very basic animation, with no live shots at all. That's how it sort of first came in. And I watched it with the dogs, and the dogs liked it because they put lots of sound effects in, the dogs. And I think the dogs see dogs better when they're sort of drawn more basically than when they're sort of actually rendered. So we watched it and we thought, we've got to do this. And then gradually, over about a year, it started to come in, and they did lots of reshoots, and then the animation wasn't done, and so there was lots of scoring to actors with a guy playing a dog, right. Which is kind of hard to really get behind sometimes. But really, the thing with animation, even though it's not an animation, is I think really I finally get the film about 2 weeks before we finish. So I think we made a lot of changes near the end, as it suddenly all just sort of locks into place. I think that's, if you sort of work backwards, I think obviously Call of the Wild is that story. It really is that story. It's about our relationship with, dogs, with wolves, that have got something a little bit wrong with them, so they're not frightened of us. And I think part of that story is such an evolved and common love story that we have with dogs, that part of that was brought into, I think a big part of that was brought into Dragons. Yeah. It wasn't that, that story has been with us for, 10,000 years. We've been loving dogs for 10,000 years. So to apply that to this idea of the dragon, I think just echoed a story that already existed. And so maybe that was another reason why it attracted Chris to doing that story, because he'd probably already, how deliberate that was in Dragons, I don't know. Obviously, it was part cat, part dog, part, obviously, well, mythical creature, obviously, part, sort of child, yeah. part your, in like his Dark Materials, the great thing in his Dark Materials is the demon, yeah. which is really the soul, an external version of the soul. So there was a little bit of that as well, I think, in there. All of those reasons make it a wonderful storytelling sort of, sort of basis. And I think that's really what it was. And probably why I love doing those kind of stories is because I love dogs, and it really resonates. It was going to have a lot less dialogue in it than it ended up with in the beginning. It was all going to be very, very pantomime driven, which is, I think, what Chris is absolutely wonderful at. But I think it was the end of Fox. They were just bought by Disney, and I think they got a bit frightened, and they started to sort of add more and more dialogue, and that was a bit of a shame. But I think it ended up a beautiful film. But certainly that was one of the things signing on was right. Well, there's not going to be a lot of dialogue, so we need music to tell the story. Right. But because it wasn't finished and we couldn't write the music, and I think they sort of decided to add lots of dialogue to tell the story, which they didn't really need to do. If they'd waited a bit, I'm sure I could have done it. But, that's... Chris and Dean got that forbidden friendship scene through DreamWorks just by the skin of their teeth. I mean, just by the power of sort of persuasion. But these kind of things are the hardest things to get past the studio, get past everybody. Because when you watch them and you go to a preview and there's just a few drawings, and everyone's like waiting, we've got to cut that, you know. And it's the frustrating thing about animation is that the beauty of animation doesn't happen until right at the end. The faith involved is huge. So I think probably the film could have been more that than it probably ended up with. But, you know, and they had Harrison Ford, who's wonderful in it as well. So I think they probably thought, well, we better give him something to say. Although again, the lack of faith in actors and animation acting in animation is amazing sometimes from studio execs. It's like, you know, how many times have you done this? And you should know now that Harrison Ford can say a lot just with his eyes. Before I ever thought of film writing, before I ever sort of heard, you know, Elmer Bernstein, I played Copeland stuff, and I remember playing Rodeo, and it's like, this is the coolest music. I mean, it was kind of that and Stravinsky and Brahms at the time when it was, you know, in orchestras, and I remember just being so adoring of that Americana style. I've probably always wanted to do it. I can't really do cowboys films because they tend to be kind of, you know, sort of weirdly violent. But this came along, and obviously that chance to be a bit in that vein was just wonderful. And you really sort of dig around in that style of music, and American music is so, you know, it's such a melting pot of styles. And Copeland just seemed to sort of, as far as the orchestral version of what this folk tradition was. But there's a lot that he didn't sort of go into. There's a lot of styles of music, obviously, that have gone into American folk music. And, you know, it was interesting even just doing some research on Inuit music. And we tried lots of things. To tell you the truth, I had a sort of a stack of about 6 different things for that to try and, you know, find the right one, and it's a mixture of about 3 of the 6, but one of them was you know, some Tuvan kind of stuff at the bottom, and then Sandy Cameron doing this jeté sort of style of violin thing, skittery violin, plus a bunch of banjos. We didn't really see the wolf until very late in the day. I mean, they kept sort of updating the image, but I wasn't really seeing it working until very late. So once you finally see it, so you kind of, oh, this will probably work. But until then, I'd stacked up about 6 ideas, you know, and we kept trying different ones in different places, and then try and fit it in the various sequences comes in. But the one that worked the best is the one that's in the film. So. It's funny, there was a big cue before that where the first time he's in with the dog sled, and that one I kind of wrote as a working theme. Yes. And the actual Buck takes the lead cue. I didn't get that right for quite a while. It wasn't until I get the other one right, I think. And that one sort of informed it. Just the orchestration styles and things like that, I think. And then they recut it a lot, and then that, strangely enough, is one of those things where you look, you know, you've done the sequence and then they cut it a lot, and it just doesn't work at all now. So you kind of had this horrific sort of thing. Well, can I reconform this into fit? And it was actually better to throw it away and start again. And then, ironically, the throwing it again and starting again, throwing it away, starting again, was the one that is in the movie. And again, it just, I think, they changed the edit in such a way that it just had a different flow to it, and I started to try a different sort of style, and the kind of the 6/8 rhythm just flowed really well with the editing, which the earlier version it would never have worked, I don't think, and the intercutting was totally different in the final version. So again, that was a last minute sort of Hail Mary that worked really well. Yes, I kind of, I got a call, sort of with a kind of like, Doug Liman's just trying to do a movie in 4 weeks, kind of thing. Is sort of thing. Would you ever? And it's like, and I didn't have anything else on, and I hadn't got anything else for 20. I mean, I had, but it got moved, and then I was supposed to be doing the opera, and that got moved. So I just kind of said, I thought, oh yeah, well, let's do it. It'll be fun. It'll be fun, and it was fun. It was crazy because it's Doug Liman, right. And but we did it so quick. But the thing with Doug Liman movies that I'd forgotten is that you have to go through a lot of ideas. You have to go through a lot of material. So I think I wrote 70 minutes of music, of which we only ended up with 12 minutes. Wow. But that was okay because I just needed to find the right 12 minutes. And we didn't really know how to do the movie until we started to work on it. And they hadn't even temped it at all. Everything was so quick. The way he shot it, the way it was written, the way he shot it, everything was so fast. I mean, and I think I had 3 weeks. And they had a very short dub, and I've never, a dub being where they put the sound together, and the dialogue and the sound and the music together, and it's really the last minute when anybody can make any changes, and normally you must have the music done before the dub. But I really didn't have any music approved, shall we say, until, the end of the dub. I mean, I think the last day, really. I think it was a question of a mixture of Doug sort of deciding, that will work, and me getting it right. I know Doug so well that he's so sensitive to music. Basically, he kind of gives you a running commentary of whether or not he hates the movie or loves the movie, depending on whether your music is making him engage or pushing him away. So as you play things for him, he sits there and kind of says, well, now I just don't care about them. I just don't care about them. Oh. No, now I'm quite interested. I'm quite interested in. No, I don't care about them anymore. So yeah, it is. So you basically go, okay, well, where I went to that, it's not working, and that bit works, and when I went to that, and it's not working. But it's complicated, but he's wonderful, and I always love his films. I love the ones that I haven't done as well. I love them more in a way because I get to enjoy them. It's just when you're in a movie, you lose the pleasure of enjoying the movie, and the first time you see it, it's not working very well, and then it finally gets really good with Doug. I mean, all his movies like that, they seem like they're just never going to come together, and then bingo, just at the end, like Bourne was like that, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith was like that, and so I'm sure that's the case on all the movies I didn't do with him as well. But so I love watching them from the outside as well, just coming in and watching. Was it American Made? American Made?
Oh yes.
I thought that was a fantastic movie, absolutely fantastic movie. It was brilliant. And having seen that, I thought, I've got to work with Doug again. So, enjoyed it. We had a date to go over, and record in the summer. Well, it still is the summer. But then England wouldn't let me in because they don't take any notice of American vaccines, apparently. So I didn't have enough time. I hadn't allowed myself enough time. I thought, well, I got the vaccine in March or something. And I thought by July I'll be able to go there and everything will be open. And it wasn't. They basically still required a quarantine, and I didn't have enough time between the sessions and when I landed to quarantine. So I've moved it again till September, which is good because I'm getting to, rewrite it a bit better now. So Gavin Greenaway, who's the other composer on it, it's not just me. So we've been over Skype or Zoom or FaceChat. We've been getting it right, extending it a little bit, and it was originally written 28 years ago, but we did 2 performances, and it's we call it an opera-tainment because it maybe is too much fun for a normal opera, but it's too serious for a musical, but it's too tuneful for an opera, but it's also too complicated musically for a musical. Right. So it's right in the crack,
Did you guys write the libretto and everything? Or?
No, the libretto was written by Gavin and I when we were at music college, in Trinity College of Music. We met with an artist called Michael Petrie, or as we knew him, Miguel Petrie. I still call him Miguel, who's a Tex-Mex who was in London and has been in London ever since he was in his early 20s. And we met him there, and he's an installation artist and a writer on art, and a very brilliant person. And we'd done a lot of art installation pieces with him when we were at college, all the way through to this was 1994. And he got a commission in the Bonn Kunsthalle, which is like the sort of National Gallery of Germany, and they had a little opera. They had a little theatre in there, and so they commissioned him to do an installation art piece. And they said, "You can do it whatever you want." He said, "Well, can I do an opera? Because you've got a theatre." I said, "Okay, sure." So we did it with him. He wrote the libretto, and it's about Jean Cocteau, W.H. Auden, and Oscar Wilde sitting in heaven in a bar, basically chatting. And Mrs. Wilde and a Greek chorus of women, and we just had 13 musicians there because we were, the budget was very, very short. So, but we've rewritten it for a bigger orchestra, and we're just sort of finishing up the demos, doing the orchestrations now, and then we go, and I think we're recording mid-September. I always say that one of the reasons I eventually came here was that the opera. I got through the opera, and I thought, well, if I can do that, I could probably go to Hollywood. I can handle that, because that was, talking about stressful. The opera was very stressful. I mean, it was like, it was very hard to do, and I just got to the other side of it and thought, well, I guess I was doing advertising music at the time, and I think I did that, and I thought I can't go back to advertising music. It's just too soul destroying, So the least I can do is, take up Hans's invitation and go to Hollywood.